Welcome to BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. My name is Runciman. I'm Head of Content and Insight. Today we're looking at the subject of having a career in AI. We hear a lot about AI, a lot about ethics. We at BCS talk a lot about the ethics. We also have qualifications now in AI, and there's all sorts of opportunities for careers. So I'm speaking to three people that really know what they're talking about today. Sarah Burnett, John O'Connell, and David Walker. And I'm going to go around to each of them now and just ask them to introduce themselves, give us a little bit of background. Before I do that, please remember that you're allowed to ask questions. I'm sure you know by now on Zoom that you go to the bottom of the screen, there's the Q&A tab there. Please put questions in as we go through, which we'll try and pick them up maybe as we go, but usually we have a half-hour conversation or so and then do 15 minutes Q&A, but we're flexible. So let's go around and have a quick chat and introduction to each of our panelists. And can we start with Sarah, please? Please introduce yourself, Sarah. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me to be on the panel. I'm Sarah Burnett. I'm founding partner at Emergence Partners, which is a leading edge technology consultancy company. I got into AI, in the field of AI, through my experience of working in intelligent automation. So I'm very much in the applied AI side of the market. And I've been, for the past few years, I've been helping and advising many of the intelligent automation vendors on how to make their products better and helping them with their go-to-market strategies as well.
Thank you very much, Sarah. John, can we come to you, please?
Hi, Brian. Thank you for inviting us to the panel. Really good to be here. So my name is John O'Connell, Director of Strategic and Service Innovation. And yeah, really good to be here. Similar to Sarah, my role is in applied AI. I suppose my interest, being a former Director of Business Intelligence, comes from being interested in how we can improve and advance our data analytics value as an organization. And that's kind of where the AI interest comes through for me. And defining what the problem is in the business, and then getting a perspective from users about how we can do things quicker and better. I think for me, looking at AI was the ability for machines to interpret and learn from data is really key to help make a prediction and make it better. Where the machine learns from the data, arrives at a prediction without being probably explicitly programmed is a key thing for me. And I think also a key thing about artificial intelligence and machine learning is I look at artificial intelligence as what we're seeking to achieve, and the machine learning is at the center of how we achieve it. I think there's probably an important distinction there. And from my team and with the team within SEW, we look at it as AI as kind of machines and humans working together, because I think there's a symbiotic nature there, and they augment us. And I look at AI as giving my team kind of superpowers really to do their job better. So really, really key. But no, great to be here.
I like that little phrase, John, and we'll come back to it. AI gives your team superpowers. David, can we ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Well, hello, folks. My name is David Walker. I'm the Practice Director at QA for our data analytics, AI and digital transformation capabilities. QA is a learning services business. We help develop skills and early talent and individuals for all sorts of technical roles. My focus really around AI is on the people and helping organizations adapt to it. AI is changing operating models in businesses. It's changing the way that skills and careers will work. And what we've been working with a number of customers is developing some of the deeper skills, but also very much around the change and adoption in organizations towards data literacy, AI literacy, developing ethics. So the business consumer and dimensions of the business that are going to benefit, consume and work from AI, understand how it's going to assist them on their journey.
Lovely. Thank you, David. Well, welcome to all three of you. We're really pleased to have you. We've got a panel that know what they're talking about, so all slightly different perspectives as well. Before we start, let's just do a little bit of looking at the terms that we're using. There's robot process automation, there's intelligent automation, there's AI, there's machine learning, there's neural networks. These things are not all interchangeable, but roughly how do you see those things fitting together in our conversation today? Can we come to you first of all, Sarah?
Yes, sure. So in terms of applying AI in business to get benefits from AI, we're looking at what is called narrow or task-based AI, which is focused on activities that the AI specializes in. So it could be intelligent document processing because it's got capabilities for natural language processing, understanding context, understanding some of the unstructured data that come in documents. So the huge buzz about intelligent automation started with RPA, which is robotic process automation. Inherently, it has no intelligence. They're robots that are software programs that are programmed by a human, and they do work sequentially. Basically, they do what they are asked to do. And they used to automate processes going through the user interface as if a human was sat at the login screen and typing login to a system, and then going through cutting and pasting data, generally used for structured data processing. So companies started, this massive buzz about RPA started a few years ago, and companies started automating their transactions. And then they realized, actually, I need to also process the documents that come with these transactions. So then they realized they needed intelligent document processing. And then they thought, okay, at the front end of my organization, I might need a chatbot, you know. And so this field of intelligent automation was born, which is combining robotic process automation with various of these other AI-enabled, task-based, you know, narrow AI. And the field has got bigger and bigger because then it was all about orchestrating. So, you know, one robot finishes its job. How do we get the next bit of the process going? So they started orchestrating process that, you know, building orchestration capabilities. They started doing intelligent orchestration, intelligent prioritization, and then along came process mining. So it's just growing and growing.
Lovely, thank you. John, do you have a view on that sort of definition side of things, how you look at it?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what Sarah was saying. I think, you know, a lot of people talk about AI, but in two contexts. One of strong AI, where people refer to it as kind of artificial general intelligence, that people refer to. Super intelligence is where, you know, computers know a lot of things, and it's kind of similar to what people would class as kind of the Terminator world, the future view, and we're not kind of there. The other thing that they class as kind of weak AI, which is a bit of an unfair term, but weak AI talks to exactly what Sarah talks about, where the huge benefit is. And we decided within SEW to look at kind of three avenues there. It all comes from, as I said at the very beginning, I suppose, designing what the problem definition is. What are you trying to address, and whether you need to use AI or whether you don't, or whether ordinary statistical analysis would work. So we start with that, and we applied three areas that we were looking at. One was called cognitive automation, which is RPA, robotic process automation, that Sarah talked about, looking at all our processes that we have within our organization, HR, finance, procurement, how we can hand off between the human and the machine together that can make things much more seamless, should we say. But the most important thing there is, in the sense, from the human perspective, is having that subject matter expert in that domain there, to be able to look at the process, map it out. And we call it, within our organization, intelligent automation, where we don't just automate what we have today. We look at, can we make it click quicker, faster, better, and then we look at where the machine can add value and where the human can add value, so they work together. The second one we look at is cognitive insights. Within healthcare, we have an awful lot of data, and machine learning is really good to sort of link data together and start looking at patterns that humans can't work through. So an example of this is where we look at patients traveling through a healthcare system. They go into primary care, they go into secondary care, they go into sort of clinics or community, but seeing a whole view of what good looks like and what basically an optimal care pathway would look like. That's kind of where we'd apply AI. So we link all that data together and then look for clusters and patterns. And that's you know, what we class as cognitive insights. So there's a big area of development there, and where we use, you know, data science engineers. And then the last one we're looking at, again, is something called cognitive engagement, where you can get AI systems that can actually dial out to you. They can make an appointment, book a clinic, they can actually talk to you. So it's kind of like Alexa in your home, but they call it Lexi in the cloud, I think Google do. And it's a system where it can actually phone you, listen to your responses and make appointments, and actually then do, as Sarah was saying, the RPA in the background, actually book and send you a meeting out so you get it in your diary. So there are three kind of key areas, and there's a lot of research being done. If you just, I always call it off the peg AI. So if you apply those, you can demonstrate a huge amount of value. And as an organization with individuals and staff, they can earn a lot on each one of those programs as they develop. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you, John. Obviously, it's a massively complex area. There's so much of interest going on. Can I come to you, David, and just ask you, maybe you're sort of representing AI to people as you get them to train. Do you have some sort of elevator pitch that perhaps you give to sort of give a definition and a feel for it?
So my view here is it's holistic, right? We've dealt with a lot of the technology aspects here, but what AI is, when it's unavoidable, the topic of how will we have a career in AI? Everyone's going to have a career with AI within the next 5 years. It is unavoidable. AI is going to assist and augment what we do. It's going to allow us to make decisions more effectively. What has changed for me really dramatically in the last 2 years is the price of entry has dropped quite dramatically. If you start looking at the major cloud providers and data providers out there, they're allowing you to access now AI as a service. They're allowing you to work and collaborate and communicate and build and start doing things in AI, which would have been a much more complex journey for organizations, much more costly to do. So the ability to engage in AI into narrower functions, like you say, creating things like chatbots, or to start using what would have been really complex things like computer vision and that sort of idea of pattern matching or empathy or sentiment mapping with context, that would have been really challenging to do. But now we can do a lot of that through some more simple modeling, through code calls, through API environments. And you can see that as part of the ongoing data transformation and digitization of organizations. Increasingly, you can see organizations starting to move their data load from the on-premise to leveraging the cloud. And when you've got the services there to start doing intelligent automation, speed of decision around it, it becomes very powerful. The other angle for me, though, is not just the technology, it is the impact on the operating model of the business and the impact on the capabilities of the business that go with it. So if AI, and I've seen this AI and data transformation, that if the technology inevitably leads the transformation, but the culture to use AI well and to understand its impact on you and deliver real business benefit involves a wider aspect of workforce change and transformation as well. So you're looking at there, say, developing a confidence and competence that people can work effectively with data in and out. You can understand that you might be putting cognitive bias into it. You can understand the ethical implications of what you can and can't do with AI. And that's why, for me, it's very important, not just within the technical remit, but also what you would call into more business or leadership stakeholder roles, so they can guide the organization successfully through AI transformation and adoption.
Lovely, thank you, David. That's very interesting. In fact, the first official question we had on our little outline here was, how do you get into AI? I think what you're saying is it's inevitable that we're all going to be kind of in it anyway. So perhaps you should look at what our second question here, which is what's it like to actually work on a day-to-day basis? What sort of thing at the moment are people likely to be doing? Can we start with you, Sarah, on that one?
Yes, sure. So firstly, it's an incredibly fast-moving industry, so you do need to keep up and you need to understand what's going on. So, for example, there are frameworks out there that many organizations use to develop their AI-enabled technologies, and the libraries that go with those, evolve and develop, and you need to keep up with those. You almost need someone to just manage the evolution of those libraries, But it is a very exciting field, and it really depends on the type of role that you have within the, in your job, basically. So if you're a data scientist, I think John will be able to tell you much more about that, but it's about identifying appropriate data structures for the kind of product that the company is developing, and creating the capability effectively to tap that data for analysis to support product development. If you're an AI engineer, you might be looking at developing new algorithms, testing new algorithms. But if you're in the field of applied AI, where you're using a third-party packaged solution, like a document processing solution, then you'd be looking at, well, what documents do I need to go through this process? What am I going to need to do? What data am I going to tag for these solutions to identify, etc.? So really, it's quite a lot of varied roles within AI. Interesting,
thank you. Now, John, you've got teams working in this area already. Tell me a little bit about what they do.
Yeah, so it's quite varied. I think on those three fronts, we've got on the cognitive automation, the RPA, we are working with systems to bring RPA. So it's a lot of on the ground, actually helping people to understand their processes. So working really closely, it sounds quite, I suppose, basic in a sense, but actually working with subject experts to sort of map their processes out and working together in sort of joint teams to sort of test. And when you're using RPA, I know Sarah's come across this before, is don't try and boil the ocean. Start with something very small just to prove the case, because you've got to bring people on board with that journey, because it could feel that you're bringing a technology in to replace their jobs, but what you're trying to do is augment and make it more efficient for them, to release them to do higher value work. So there's a lot of that cultural work going on at the moment within our organisation. On the linking of data again, again, it's kind of testing pilots of linking data to see what the insights are, and then thinking out how do we then scale up. So a lot of the work goes around, it sounds quite mundane, but cleaning the data, making sure you've got really, really good data is a foundation if you're using it for machine learning, and getting that right, because no amount of what you call algorithmic sophistication is going to overdo really poor data. So it's really getting your data quality right. So I suppose in our organisation, it's probably a lot of experiments just to see what works and what doesn't work. And then the other one on the cognitive engagement piece, it's testing the technology in an environment that's safe, that we can run concurrently with other environments to see that there's a benefit. But yeah, so it's interesting time. Culturally, I think it's a big challenge in the sense of getting people up to the same level. I think getting them to the same understanding. I think from a leadership perspective, that's one thing I would note as well, that AI is important from the technical skills, but I think from a leadership skills, it's really important that leaders understand where they can apply it to a business problem model, because you've got kind of supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning, all of those different technologies and models that you can use apply to different problems. So it's knowing what the problem is and which model or which technique you use. And as Sarah said, there's lots of frameworks and platforms out there to test. So I think for us, it's kind of defining what the problem is first, and then seeing which part of, does it fit with an RPA model, or does it fit with cognitive insights and linking data together? If that's the case, then which model would we use, structured or unstructured data? So it's such a fast-moving topic at the moment, and I think it's just experiment, start small, get whet your appetite with it and see what you can do from it. But yeah, really exciting times.
Thank you, John. Sorry, I was muted. Can you believe it? Always the way, isn't it? Just from a more tangential point of view, John, is there a danger that senior management can perhaps view it as a little bit of a magic wand here, and so they need a bit more education as well?
Yeah, there is, and I think AI isn't necessarily, it's not the panacea for everything. There's lots of business questions and insights that can be derived from general statistics and information that can be sort of drawn together. So you've got to really look at what the business problems are that you're trying to address. So, for example, Amazon and other people use different types of machine learning analysis. For example, like on supervised learning, Netflix will look at sort of data they have, and then I recommend the movie. So if you watch one movie, then it will say, well, you like that, you must like that. So that's a recommendation engine that's being used. So you really need to understand what the business problem is, and not just go, sometimes leadership does want to sort of invest in AI without understanding what the business problems they're trying to address. And that's the most important thing, I think, really.
Interesting. David, I saw you nodding away there when we talk about the magic wand.
Well, this is, I have had conversations with very senior leaders going, we need AI, and the answer is why. And you ask the question why, I said, well, because our competitors got it. But that's not the reason, right? AI is a step on increasing data maturity within an organization. So a lot of people will start to jump into AI before they've really increased data literacy and understanding of effective working usage of data within an organization in the first instance. AI can assist and augment, but if it's based on shaky platforms in terms of, as John said, the organization, the structure of the data, and more importantly the hypothesis, the questioning culture of working with data well, so they can form effective insight-based questions. Whether using AI, data science, just big data analytics, then it really comes down to, is the organization at the consumer and the person, the aim of the business, which is to deliver insight and use it to improve efficiency or effectiveness in the organization. They don't understand the art of the possible and their roles and responsibilities of leaders or consumers of that data, then you get a very uneven transformation and a bit of what Gartner would call that trough of disillusionment, as the magic wand or the AI and data ivory towers are not delivering the value that's needed because other participants inside the data value chain have not taken their responsibilities to use data and information effectively.
Yeah, that's interesting. And staying with you, David, can we move on to this question of what AI skills are currently in demand? And obviously this thing is going to be cyclical, isn't it? It's going to change. But at the moment, what's the demand that you're seeing?
So I can talk for a couple of levels there. What we are seeing increasingly is a few things. We're seeing within the learning and training industry, we're seeing people who would have been developers in their background now having to become increasingly data centric. So you're talking about intelligent automation, the rest of it using API or pre-wrapped systems. You're seeing that as really the direction the major cloud vendors are taking people. So those sort of technology professions are having to become more data centric, more numerate, more statistically aware as part of the development of their core skill set, whether they go on to write or build their own AI models, or they do use it in sort of an assist and consume model from an API, depends on the maturity of the organization and what it's trying to achieve there. We're seeing increasingly a move in things that I would call as functional supporting roles, like business analysis and project management, where people need to become more technically enabled and literate. I think the role of a BA is really important in what we just talked about process re-engineering, determining the viability of a product. And then, as I said, the other thing we're doing a lot of work with at the moment is increasing data literacy and non-technical capabilities of an organization, so they can start reaping the benefits and the reward around this.
Excellent, thank you. So, John, can I come to you and ask that same question? What skills demands are you seeing at the moment? Is it around data science and that sort of?
I suppose it's a mix, really. I think specifically quite high demand in programming languages around things like, for example, Python and R, Java. So interest in those areas as well, but also equally understanding the sort of machine learning frameworks that are out there as well, and expertise in using those like TensorFlow and Keras and other platforms. We're also seeing that, I suppose people who have experimented with it, there's lots of platforms out there, like Google got platforms, you've got AWS, and you've SageMaker. I think Google have got something called Colab as well. So it's people with experience in those areas. And we're I suppose for us, I suppose also is looking at expertise in statistics, in mathematics, optimization, general algorithm development, and coding skills. So it's a lot of people from a sort of a data science analytical background, but moving across into coding. There's a blend across in that, really.
Excellent, thank you very much. Now, Sarah, I believe you had a chat to some of your BCS women group about this question. What happened there? What feedback did you get?
Well, the feedback is basically there are a lot of courses available. So I've sort of looked into it a bit further. And I found there are courses that are aimed at business people. So it helps business people understand AI and with a view to making informed investment decisions. You can find courses such as the ones that are run by major universities. Oxford University, for example, has an AI course. There are conversion courses. So if you already have a degree and you want to change careers, there are conversion courses that many universities offer. And you can actually find those online really easily, and masters as well. They basically the good opportunity that these provide is that you can do them part-time, and you can carry on working and doing these courses part-time. And many have paid placement opportunities as well, because there's such a lot of demand. There are an awful lot of internships advertised. If you are looking to get into this field, try some of those internship offers. And then, of course, there's loads and loads of free stuff available. We talked about the frameworks. TensorFlow offers tutorials. There are Keras tutorials. A lot of videos. You just need to just search for those and you find them. But then there are whole organizations that offer, non-academic courses like, coding clubs and free ebooks on, programming in Python and all kinds of things available. And I run AI Accelerator, which is a BCS Women initiative. Basically, what we are doing is making AI accessible. I run about 1 or 2 events every quarter. They vary from webinars and hands-on sessions to just conversations about, what AI can do. I've just run one, so they look at the events pages of BCS and BCS Women for the next one that comes along. So lots of free stuff. And actually, just to add, a lot of the technology vendors that offer packaged solutions, they run coding academies, open source. You can just go in and learn about their products, and often before you get to the products, they tell you about AI. They tell you about, what AI is. And moreover, you can actually download their trial versions of their software and play with them, do something and learn by doing. It's really the best advice I can give.
Lovely, thank you. Now, I think you've already given us a really interesting sort of basis and context for our conversation here, and we've already had a whole bunch of questions in, so I'm going to come onto them a little bit earlier than normal because there's some really good ones here. I'm going to put the first one perhaps to you, John, if that's all right. An anonymous attendee asked, what is the best way to learn about how to use machine learning, AI, and neural networks? There are a lot of guides on the internet, but they all focus on the example materials. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say, following on from what Sarah said as well, there's a huge range of practical tools out there, and I think people have to proactively define their own curriculum. I'd suggest, in the sense of there's lots of cloud-based development environments, so get onto one of those. You don't necessarily need to load code down yourself to your own laptop. You've got Google Collaboratory, you've got Amazon SageMaker, Microsoft Azure Notes. I think IBM has something called Data Platform Notebooks, and all of those are really, really good environments to start testing with some very basic code to see what works. And I believe as well, there's some good ones as well, like Data Camp is another one. You can have an app on your phone actually and learn in your spare time if you're on the move. So there's some really practical things that you're doing. And I think was it a question about when to apply it, was it? And
yeah.
So again, it goes back down to I suppose the question that's been asked. Supervised learning is very much what I class as kind of how a child would learn maths in a sense. So the system's told what to do and how to do it. If you're going into unsupervised learning, again, it looks at clustering. So again, like some Amazon where a customer bought this type of product, you'd also might like that. So that's kind of where your unsupervised learning would come in. And then you've got reinforcement learning, which is another really great example of AI where it's been used as a hybrid between both. And it looks at the machine gets a reward signal. So you use TEDxPlan and look for something and say, it's either got it right or wrong, and the machine gets a reward signal. So all of these are really, really good. And then I think the latest advancement that people are probably hearing is something called deep learning. So it goes down even to another lower layer, where it talks about a very old-fashioned concept called neural networks, which was developed way, way back. But we didn't have the scale of the computing power that we have today, and we didn't have the volume of data. We both now got the volume of data because of digital. We've also got the machine power. So that's taken an advancement. And what the neural network does, it goes through and it starts looking, and you start to see applications where images of both speech recognition and image recognition are being used for deep neural networks, where they can identify, for example, cancers that a clinician may not necessarily spot more accurately than a human. So I think the overlap between what a human can spot and a machine can spot, we've gone past that now. Machines are actually working out better. So all of those applications have got different use cases. So the most important thing is, I went back to the very beginning, that sounds quite boring, but it's what's the business problem you're trying to address? And it's looking at those suites of the three things of kind of, automation, linking of data together, and then the sort of outreach of sort of people where you can do sort of automation as well. Yeah,
lovely, thank you. Now, we've had a question in here about what qualifications or background would a student need, maybe to get into AI at an advanced apprenticeship level or something similar to that. Obviously, BCS have AI certifications, just to slot that in there. But let me come to David on that one. That seems a bit of a question for you there, David. What's your view on that one?
Well, there's a lot happening out here now, and it depends when we're talking about AI. Where do you want to get in, and what's your background? I can see a couple of other questions further down that sort of relate to this. Okay, so you don't necessarily need to have a very strong maths background. I think data engineering and the shaping, the pipeline, the automation of data, that's more typical of a good engineering or DevOps skill set. In terms of what's happening out on a wider basis within organizations, do ask your organization what it's doing around things like apprenticeship programs. You've got your level 4 programs, which are really about data analysts and analytics. Will get you into the basis of the machine learning model. Recently, there's a level 7 master's program that has been dealt with, and that's all AI and much more of this AI concept. And those are also levy funded within organizations. So if there's any people here from L&D teams or thinking about how their organization can build this capability, it's an environment where organizations can draw that down from things like apprenticeship and levy funding. I think it's important you develop the skills to deliver an immediate impact to yourself. AI is a huge topic, and developing something that is going to allow you to do something impactful for your business today, something for your skill set, is the first part. So as mentioned, there's some of the great things out. If you're a non-technical leader, Microsoft are a brilliant AI leaders school. If you are technical, then build a chatbot. That's one of the first things you can do. You can start really thinking about that sort of narrow but intelligent automation and those sort of skills. If you're already a Java programmer, do you need to learn Python? No, you don't need to. You can stay with Java. Python is definitely the growing language within this field. And the good news is if you're a Java or an older school programming language, you'll probably find Python a heck of a lot more relaxing than debugging Java code.
Okay, you picked one up there. Thank you for that, David. Appreciate that very much. Had an interesting question here. Perhaps put this one to you, Sarah. Miuru has asked this. What common mistakes do you think a professional who comes from a software engineering background makes when entering into data science and AI? So that's quite a perceptive question.
Well, I think it's the difference between deterministic and probabilistic in the technology. So coming from a software development background where you just tell the machine what to do and then you step through your code to see where you made mistakes, the AI is able to use analytics to make decisions based on its learning, and you have to be aware of that it's when it comes up with an answer, it's a probabilistic answer that it's come up with. Is this a dog or a cat? 76% chance it's a cat, 24% chance it's a dog, and then you have to go from there and make decide what you do with the outcomes. So I think that's probably, in my mind, that's probably the biggest difference. It's also the infrastructure you need for AI, the power that you need to process, go through large volumes of data really fast. Maybe think about how those might be affected, given that you're potentially going through a lot of data as well.
Lovely, thank you. One here from Mark Ainsworth, which I'm going to direct to you, John. You've probably seen this. We mentioned already the business analysis type role in our projects, but Mark's just asking how important is that type of role in the AI field?
Business analyst, yeah, absolutely critical, I think, of understanding the business background and the way things operate and work. I think they go hand in hand. You need the SMEs in those domains to understand how it operates. So yeah, absolutely. I think when you're looking at kind of I suppose a data science team, it's a whole broad range of people with deep domain knowledge and degrees and masters and bachelor degrees in computer science and related disciplines. And you may even have someone with a PhD, but you also do need those business analysts on the ground as well, understand the processes and the way systems work today, because that's the only way we're going to probably improve and automate as we go forward to apply AI, but absolutely fundamental.
Good. Thank you. That's helpful.
Just mentioning what David was saying earlier about degrees, and just to be aware that there is formal structure to go through and learners go, but organisations such as Apple and Google are no longer considering hard requirements of a degree necessarily. It's so fluid and advancing. It's people learning with the latest code or technologies. Lots of platforms out there, so it's kind of micro bite-sized learning. I think is becoming a lot more the norm. I don't know if people have picked that up as well, but I'm not saying gone are the days where you study a 5-year PhD, which people will do, but there's a lot more bite-sized work coming through and sort of modules that people are sort of being seen as critical. If you've actually tested something, you've used it, and you've got an application when you apply for roles, that people are seeing that as really important.
Thank you, John. And I see you're typing an answer to the person that's asked about the NHS actor, so please carry on with that. Thank you very much.
Just a shout out to have a look at NHS Futures, Future NHS. There's something called Analyst X, which has been launched this week, and there's some really good learning paths there around Python and stuff. It's all freely available for anybody in the NHS and social and healthcare. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. David, been asked, is there a certification useful for us to get a job in the AI field? Anonymous attendee, but a careers question.
Yeah, it certainly can be. It will depend on where your role is coming back. And one of the other questions there about the business analyst is we're seeing increasingly business analysts becoming more tech BA, building up some of those skills around working with data project solutions. I'm going to mention a competitor for certification here, but the Enterprise Big Data Framework does some really good agnostic skill sets around how do you become things like an analyst, how do you become things like a data scientist, engineer. And I think that professional capability, that's one of the things I think is most valuable for you at the moment as a certification. How do I do it well? How do I develop the mindset to work with this in a professional environment? And then what is my tuning and skill set level? Where the biggest success of organizations is helping their communities to become professional data science, AI engineers, RPA engineers. We do that in our junior talent or apprenticeship, on our B2B skills programs. That's sort of the biggest part of it. And then choose your technical stack. And if you're in this field, there's going to be lifelong learning, because I think, as said earlier on by one of the panelists, is the rate of change here is phenomenal, and what you think is up to date now in 12 months time will be very, very different. So it is a continuous learning and a micro learning career, but the certification shows that you've reached a level of core competency. What I usually strongly believe is when an organization moves to, an industrial role moves to certification, the baseline has been understood, and it's a good way to make sure you match what people think is a great entry point for this skill set. But this is still an emerging and changing area.
It is. Thank you very much. Good. Here's a nice question, Sarah. For someone who is okay at maths, a strong background in programming in Java and Python, would I be able to get a job in AI? I think yes, but I'm going to turn over to you. You're the expert.
I think so, definitely, yes. I think because of the availability of resources out there, I strongly recommend that you go out there, you try what's out there. So you don't even need data sets. There are data sets available out there for learning purposes. There is data, for example, to allow AI to analyze handwriting. You know, there are data sets for scoring credit, customer credits, all kinds of free data sets available for learning. So I suggest, if you're mathematically minded and you might get into the field of data science, to then start playing with these things and applying the algorithms. There are even solutions, there are even things like AutoML that allows you to actually try different algorithms and see what's best for your data set. Just really, my recommendation is get out there, try it, and see how you do, and don't be put off, if at first you don't succeed. Try and try again. There's just a lot out there.
Lovely, thank you. Kioma asks, I have many years of experience in strategy. How can I switch to a career in AI or tech? John, are you happy to take that one?
Yeah, I would just, I think, as Sarah said, just get out there and roll your sleeves up and get involved. I think if you're in strategy, specifically, because I think there's a big interface happening now. We're in a kind of the fourth industrial revolution now. We've got digital, we've got data, we've got analytics. So by having a digital economy now, we've got volumes of data coming through at an incredible pace. We're also seeing a rapid rise in the Internet of Things, which again are also sensor driven, giving us loads of data. So if you link those three together of kind of digital, the data, and then the advanced analytics piece, there's huge opportunity for any business to transform its current, I think as David said, its current operation, but also its operating business model. And there's something called network effects. When you build a digital model, you get scale very, very quickly. So I think anybody in strategy should be considering all of those three disciplines, and AI having a real golden thread through all of those. Really, really key. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Two here I'm going to put to you, David. What is the most in-demand sector for AI? And what sort of salaries can you earn in an entry-level job?
So the bigger sectors that we are seeing at the moment of growth, I think that especially finance, actuarial, insurance are really cottoned on to the fact that in some ways they're behind the curve of some of this. So organizations that are transforming will need more capability around this. And in terms of skill set, I mentioned this in one of the questions, I think data engineering and the pipeline work, if you're more development one, there is a huge shortage for those sort of skills. What was the second part of the question? Sorry, it was
the sort of a salary you could earn at an entry-level position.
an entry-level position. Look, let's be realistic. What it depends on your background coming in. If you're coming out of a graduate skill level, I'd be looking for more someone who can mentor me and skill me up to develop these skills in my first role. So you may be talking 30 to 40, but take a couple of good projects under your belt, take that from a consultancy point of view, or look towards an organization that needs more of his skills, and your second role or your rotation or degree of success with an organization, you can start looking at pop star wages quite quickly here. And someone who's got 4 to 5 years experience is probably quite a significant salary, but you're going to have to journeyman here. And I do think it's really important you don't think immediately go after the number. It's think about the skills and the opportunity to develop a really capability will get you to those next steps in your career.
Thank you, David. Nice balanced answer. Sarah's marked a question she'd like to answer here. Can you envisage AI ever writing software? Kevin asked that question. Sarah.
Well, it's already starting to happen. So what I saw a couple of years ago was the emergence of live guides on ensuring quality of the code that was being written, and in particular RPA code. But we're already moving beyond the sort of low code, no code environments. We're seeing some companies announcing that they have got code generator but using AI. I think these are still very early days for these, so I will wait to see the proof of those actually working, but it's very much starting to happen. Yes, absolutely. And there's one other question, if I may answer. There's one about how can a fashion designer get into this field? And, you know, John and I were talking earlier about the need for designing user experiences. And if you have any kind of artistic tendencies, definitely, you know, designing good user experiences for AI is really critical. And, you know, we've seen how some companies done brilliantly in the world by having fantastic user experiences. And of course, the fashion industry itself is really investing in this. You know, I've seen in recent, particularly over this last year with the rise of e-commerce, I've seen companies work on how they can help differentiate themselves by providing better online facilities, like, you know, virtual chatbots who help you like a personal shopper does. And so there's lots of things. And there's a fabulous demo online of somebody who's designed AI that shows you what clothes will look like using the material that's being designed. So they show you how it might hang as a dress or a pair of trousers, you know, so there are opportunities there for literally every walk of life. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Francis Quadadi Kujo sent a question in. I know programming helps a lot in AI. Is it advantageous to learn a particular language, for example, Python, to be able to perform well in AI? Maybe that's one for John.
I would say Python, yeah, absolutely. It seems to be the most amenable one for people at the moment. But I did mention this a while back to someone else, and they said, well, it can be the flavor of the day. And as David and others have said in the call, it's such a moving and rapid environment, AI. I'd probably make sure you've got a bit of a holistic view and learn a few different languages, but always keep an eye out for future stuff, because it changes very quickly. You know, probably a year and a half ago, it was very much focused from the NHS perspective on R coding, and then we moved towards Python. So, you know, dare say there would be other things coming through very quick as well. But I would get a rounded view and development across there. I think the key thing for me is kind of, I suppose, even from a coding perspective, is anybody in AI is to kind of explore the 3 pitfalls that AI have, which is around privacy, replication, and bias. You know, really important that people understand those, because with privacy, there's lots of worry about, you know, data exploitation, that people give their data, it's being exploited, profiling and prediction being used, and, you know, so get to understanding those are really, really important. I think on the replication piece, being able to explain what your model has done and why it's done it. So neural networks put this problem up, they give an answer, but unless you can explain it in this black box, there's going to be a lot of challenge in the future around those areas. So get into that. And then the last one is bias. And the way I could describe that is traditional business models. If you put bias into a traditional business model, you impact a few. But if you put a bias into an AI model and you scale it digitally, you put the bias everywhere. So be really, really careful that you don't build bias in and you have a representative population of what you're trying to resolve.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. One question that's come up here, which I'm just going to put to David, if I can. And we're coming towards the end of our process, by the way, folks, just so that you know. It's from Raymond. Hold on, I've lost it now. Let me go back up. It's about standing out. It seems to have, I do apologise.
How do you stand out as a?
Yes, that was the one. Yes, yes.
Look, if you're new into the industry, one of the things I think you need to do is show how good you are. Right? Okay, we're in the world now where what we do with our junior consultants and apprentices when we're deploying them is we ask them to work on projects, teams, we ask them to show what they do, and we ask them to hold and host their code on things like GitHub, so people can start looking at what you've done. If you can prove that you've done it, if you're good at it, show people your capability, and you know, a technical interview then will have a good idea of what you are capable of doing. But get your hands dirty, work on projects. You know, there are lots of things like citizen AI projects out there, so you can get yourself involved with this. You can go to things like hackathons, but try and get your hands dirty and show what you are good at, so employers can actually really get an idea of who you are, not on a piece of paper, but through the craftsmanship in your code.
Lovely. Thank you, David. Now that's we usually make these 3/4 of an hour, these sessions. That is 3/4 of an hour, nice and neatly. We've had loads of questions asked, and we've had some excellent insight from our 3 panelists. Thank you, folks. We've got quite a few questions open. Now, some of them are about sort of conceptual, ethical things, and I recommend that you have a look at the BCS Content Hub to see much more fascinating information about that sort of thing. If you have any careers-oriented questions you feel haven't been addressed today, please email them to me. My email is editor@bcs.org, and I will distribute them out to either our qualifications team at BCS, or if the 3 panelists are happy to get further answers in, I'll share them perhaps with Sarah, John, and David as well, just to get some information back. So we appreciate very much the input that we've had from all of you. Can I say, first of all, Sarah Burnett, John O'Connell, David Walker, thank you so much for the insight you've given us today. Lovely to hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank the audience very much for all their questions. Brilliant. Recommend you have a look at the Content Hub on BCS about more general AI information, particularly on the ethical stuff and some of the bigger sort of conceptual questions, and on the qualifications section about the BCS AI qualifications, of which are very interesting to look at as well. So I'd like to thank everybody for that participation, and I'll bring this one to an end now. Thank you all.